What an excellent day
for an exorcism.
So The Exorcist tells a story of a young girl who becomes possessed by a demon and a faithless preacher who has to overcome his own personal hurdles to save her life. What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Exorcist review series. This has been a long-awaited review series on this channel, both by you guys as well as myself. This is a film series that I have not had a whole lot of experience with, and being that it is one of the more iconic horror franchises, I've really been looking forward to getting back into the Exorcist movies, giving them another shot and seeing how my tastes have evolved as an adult, because these movies I haven't seen in well over a decade, some of them two. Also, as a lot of you guys that are following me pretty tightly know, this is going to be one of the franchises that we're going to be doing this October on 31 on 31. The theme this year is Unholy Terrors, so we're going to be looking into a lot of demon possession, religious horror, stuff like that. So The Exorcist is going to be absolutely one of the premier franchises on that. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to review every single movie before 31 on 31. We'll see how things go, but I definitely wanted to get the Exorcist films out. Also, be sure that you stick around in this video not only to find out my thoughts on this film, but also so you can find out about Skillshare and how you can save money on a trial membership to this awesome company. So thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video, and we will talk about that a little bit later. So The Exorcist is one of those horror classics that I have never really been a gigantic fan of. Not to say that I hate the movie or that I dislike the movie. I've honestly only ever seen it once before preparing for this review series, and I think my expectations kind of ruined the experience for me, because growing up I watched a lot of horror films from very young. Every single time somebody would tell me about some great horror film or some scary ass movie or something that was like a must watch, I would search the ends of the earth to find this movie. This is before Netflix, this is before Amazon Prime and all of that stuff, so you literally had to go to video stores, hope that they had it, hope they had it in stock, and then rent it, try it out, and I would do that all the time. Now, The Exorcist was one of those movies that I had this experience with, but it got so hyped up by the person that was telling me I needed to watch it. They were like, this is the scariest movie ever made, it's the scariest thing ever, it haunted my dreams as a kid, and I'm sitting there like, holy shit, this movie's gonna freaking rock my world, because even as a kid, never really got that scared by movies. I was always just entertained by them. Even the scariest movie, you would throw it there, I'd be 4 or 5 years old, and I'd be like, this shit is awesome. So I had my hype set up very high that this was going to be one of, if not the movie, to truly follow me into my dreams. And when I finally watched it, it just wasn't really for me. It's a movie that's a little bit too mature for what my age was. I mean, obviously when it got to the exorcism stuff in the third act, I was entertained. Everything leading up to that, it just wasn't really a movie for me. It wasn't really on my wavelength. So it has been a couple decades since I have seen this movie. Finally popped it in a couple of weeks ago to watch it with my wife. I watched the director's cut as well. That's the one that everybody seems to recommend. A couple of extra scenes, the little spider crawl, stuff like that. So that's the version I watched. And I'm still not the biggest fan of this movie, but I certainly respect it more as an adult. So starting off with the positives for The Exorcist, the main thing here is just the incredible visual work that they are able to do in this film. For being a 70s film, this has some of, if not arguably, the most iconic imagery when it comes to exorcisms, when it comes to demonic possession, when it comes to things of that subgenre. There are so many shots, there are so many physical, practical effects in this movie that have just become the standard for not only the horror genre, but the demon possession subgenre. I mean, the whole spinning the head 360, vomiting the pea soup, the visual degradation of her face and the scarring of where she's cut herself, even just simple shots like from behind whenever that little glow is coming through, that iconic shot where she's kind of like this on the bed. Like, there are so many visuals here that if you just take a snapshot of it, it's just iconic, and it's the gold standard for what this very popular subgenre has become. To a certain extent, to where I would almost say that The Exorcist was kind of trying to be like torture porn in the 70s before torture porn was even a thing. Now let me clarify what I mean by that, because a lot of people have negative misconceptions about what that term torture porn even means. I'm not saying that this is a pornographic movie. I'm not saying that this is a movie that is garbage and has nothing to offer you aside from the gore and the nastiness. I'm not saying that. But oftentimes when you use that term correctly, it's to describe a movie that is putting most of its effort into trying to shock you visually. And that is what this movie is certainly trying to do. It has a story, it has certain messages and themes going throughout it, so it definitely is deeper than most films of that genre today, or of that terminology today. But for a movie all the way back in the 70s, this is absolutely a film that is trying to just assault you visually with the most disturbing, haunting images that you could possibly think of at that time. It's a little bit tame by today's standards. Some people would argue that some of it still holds up, but back in the 70s, I could understand, like, for all the stories you hear about people vomiting and passing out in, you know, the first screenings of these iconic movies, I could kind of understand if somebody would do that to the first screenings that they saw of The Exorcist back in the 70s, because yeah, they go for it. I think the movie does a good job at slowly building up to this totally balls out climax. I mean, the movie starts off very quiet and very unassuming. Like, you have this whole intro in another country where one of the main priests is kind of doing like this archaeological dig, and then you start getting into Linda Blair and her mother and that whole side of the story, and kind of setting up who these characters are and where they are, and then slowly just integrating a little bit of that demon possession. There's even like some medical stuff going on in here, which kind of goes back to my previous point about assaulting you visually, where they're trying to do like this MRI, and they're trying to like stick her in their neck and try to do all these little tests on her before they realize what is going on with her. And it's pretty graphic, where they're sticking her in the neck and blood shooting out, and it's just, even for like a surgical type movie, that's pretty out there. So slowly getting into the movie, building all the way up to this balls out climax where you get the two priests that are gonna take on this demon and try to save Regan. And it's, for a pace, the movie certainly is very methodical about it, slowly peeling back the layers of that onion. And I think it builds to a really exciting, terrifying, and memorable climax. And my final positive is that you have got to give it up to the performance of Linda Blair. Now, there's good performances all throughout this movie, but she is certainly the standout. For somebody that was such a young girl, and whenever she's playing a young girl pre-possession, she's just such a sweet, lovable girl. And then you start getting into the possession, and she's flaring around, fuck me, lick me, suck cocks in hell. And it's just like all these things that are coming out of this girl's mouth that are like, whoa, that is out there. And all the physical demands that this role gave her, to the point where I haven't done a whole lot of research, but I've heard enough to know that this movie kind of screwed her up a little bit. It demanded so much out of any actress, to where even a full-grown adult that was able to do some of the things that she's able to do in this movie would be impressive. But the fact that it was a child actor and somebody just very young for the subject matter that they're requiring her character to do in this movie, very, very impressive, iconic stuff, to where I've never really heard of her doing really anything else. And forgive me if there's some awesome movie that Linda Blair was in that I'm just ignorant to, but she's known for this movie to this day because of that performance. And it's kind of a shame that, I don't know if it was just the PTSD of this role, or maybe because of the extremity of this role, she was kind of typecast, but yet she didn't become like this gigantic A-list star when she absolutely had the acting potential to be. I guess it's a little bit hard to get roles when you stick a cross in your pussy. Now, moving on to the mixed, the main aspect of this movie that I'm mixed on is the storyline regarding Father Karras. Now, this is absolutely kind of like your thematic element and kind of the heartbeat of the movie in a lot of ways, is this character and his character arc, to where he starts off, you know, he's a holy man, he's a psychologist, he eventually loses his mother to old age in this hospital, he has a crisis of faith, and the rest of the movie, he's slowly kind of trying to help Regan, but he's kind of doesn't feel like he's the best person to do it because of his crisis of faith. And then by the end, spoiler alert for a decades-old movie, has to give his life to save Regan. And there's aspects of his storyline that I really like, mainly the fact that he's the main character that gets an arc and gets development. And I think that the movie would certainly suffer without his character being a lot of the focus. And I like how things end up in the third act, where he finally has to just, embrace his faith and do whatever he has to do to get this demon out of this girl, and eventually sacrifices himself very quickly after that. And we're going to talk about Exorcist 3, but I even like how they carry through his storyline into that movie. And part of this is probably because this was one of the first times this type of storyline came out back in the 70s, and I've seen it done a lot more since then and a little bit better. The whole crisis of faith aspect of his storyline doesn't really hit as hard as I think they wanted it to hit for me personally. I mean, the whole thing about a guy who has been a priest and is certainly somebody that has dedicated his life to this faith, just his mother dying in a very old age in this hospital, that's enough to break your faith. I can't really understand that a whole lot.
Your mother's in here with his cars. Would you like to leave a message? I see that she gets it.
I mean, there's been movies where you've seen like this tragic accident where a child is murdered, or like The Signs, where a wife is suddenly killed in a car accident that just kind of shakes somebody out of their faith because they just had this thing like, if I'm such a servant of God, how could I deserve something like this to happen to me? Your mother dying of old age, I mean, did you think that because you become a priest that all of a sudden everybody you love is just not going to die anymore? I don't know. It was a little bit too much for me. I was fine just kind of going along for it, but I just didn't feel like that was enough of a compelling reason enough to go on this journey with this character. So I like his character, I like his arc at the same time. I don't think it was the most intriguing version of that type of storyline, this crisis of faith that I've seen. All right, guys, before I get into the negatives of The Exorcist, let's take a minute and talk about the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community that is filled to the brim with people like you and me that enjoy sharpening the blade of their skills, their trades, and their interests. So now, in a time where a lot of us are stuck at home a lot more than we're used to, a lot of us don't even want to leave the house, period, what better time than to learn a new skill or to develop the knowledge that you already have on a skill? And that is what Skillshare is all about. This is not just a collection of how-to videos. This is not just a collection of classes. This is a community of people that have these certain modules, these certain interests that you can integrate yourself into, develop your learning, as well as meet other people with the same interests as you that can hold you accountable and can even drive your interest even further than you anticipated it being. So if you guys are interested in checking out Skillshare, absolutely check out my link down below. The first 1,000 people to click the link down below is going to get a free month of Skillshare. If you're a content creator like me, or if you're somebody that has video or photography experience, there has been classes that I've been looking into regarding photography, regarding low budget filmmaking, to not only help my skills with what I do every single day on this channel, but also to maybe potentially give me the drive or the tools necessary to do something like a fan film or a short film, or maybe start a completely different channel and go in a different direction. Who knows what the future holds, but Skillshare gives you the tools to head towards that future. So absolutely check out that link down below if you're interested, and thank you Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now moving on to the negatives. Despite what I said about this movie having a nice pace, it does take a long time to get going. So if you're in the mood for an Exorcist movie, you're really only getting what you came for in the last 30, 40 minutes of this film, and there is a lot of buildup for that is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Namely, for me, the opening 10 minutes of this film. The whole thing about the archaeological dig and finding the little Pazuzu thing and looking at the statue, I honestly think you could probably cut that out of the movie. And maybe that's the director's cut. I haven't done a lot of research to see if that was in the theatrical cut. Maybe that's some extra stuff that Rincon wanted to put in there. But if it's not, that's a part of the movie that I think you could cut. I don't think you need that much development for the guy that just randomly shows up in the last 15 minutes of the movie and is only there for 8 of those. So there's just aspects to the movie that I think could be hurried along a little bit in that first act especially. My second negative is that I feel like we could have used a little more context, a little more explanation for who or what the hell Pazuzu is. I mean, giving it a name means that there's some kind of a story there. If this was just a nameless demon, if this was just the devil himself, or just a personified evil, I think that I wouldn't ask that many questions. It would be enough for me. But the fact that they give it a name and there's this whole archaeological dig, especially in the beginning, that has these statuettes and this, big ass thing that's erected in his honor, or whatever the hell you want to say, to where there's clearly some kind of a lore or mythology with this character. The movie never bothers to get into it, and that kind of frustrates me by the end, where I'm like, that would have been something that you could have made sense of that opening act with. You could have made more sense with the older priest coming in at the end if he would give some kind of a context to who the hell this guy is. If he came in and, the whole thing, Father Care's like, do you want to know the details of this? No, let's just get to it. If he wouldn't have done that and actually explained like, oh shit, it's Pazuzu upstairs? Do you know who the fuck this guy is? Well, let me tell you for a minute. Like, some people probably don't need that. When I watch this movie, it feels like there's something missing. And I have not seen Exorcist 2 yet. Maybe, even though everybody hates that movie, and I'm not looking forward to watching it. Maybe there's some context in that film that they were saving, I don't know. But as far as this singular movie, I think you could have used a little more explanation, a little bit more lore, mythology with who the hell Pazuzu is. But overall, guys, The Exorcist is a movie that I certainly understand its legacy. I certainly understand why some people absolutely adore this movie, why some people would claim it as their best or the scariest movie that they've ever seen. It's just never going to be that movie for me. I like it. I enjoy it a lot more as an adult. I can kind of resonate with it a little bit more, and it's not so far above my head that it was when I was a young kid and watched it. It's still not quite my cup of tea. Possession films, Exorcist films never really have been, so that might be a bit of a through line throughout this review series, we'll see. But for a movie that is often hailed as the greatest of all time, I like it. It's not quite on that level for me. So if you're a fan of demon possession and you want to see the movie that started it all, definitely check out The Exorcist with the lights off, late at night, with all the noises around you to add to that ambiance. But maybe temper your expectations a little bit. Don't walk into this like I did as a kid, thinking that this was going to absolutely ruin your life with how scary it is, because it just doesn't quite land that way for me. But certainly a classic in its own right. So definitely check this thing out online and stream it. So what do you guys think of The Exorcist? Is this one of your favorite movies of all time? Is this a movie that you actually dislike? Do you think it's overrated? Do you think it's overhyped? Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And what is your favorite movie in the Exorcist franchise? I feel like it's either going to be 1 or 3, but maybe there's a dark horse in this franchise that I am not aware of. So let me know down below what the best movie in this franchise is to look forward to. Thank you guys for watching. As always, be sure to like and share this video and hit that subscribe button so that you do not miss the rest of this Exorcist review series. And as always, thank you for watching, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.